Hello parents. Today we're going to talk about slope, slope-intercept form, standard form, and point-slope form. It is probably the most basic question that can be asked where a student is given 2 points and they're told to write the equation in one of the formats that I just mentioned, slope-intercept, standard, or point-slope. So here's an example of a problem. You're given 2 points, 2, 3 and 5, 5. Really, the first step that the child should be able to do is to calculate slope. Slope, represented by m, is the change in y over the change in x. Or it is rise over run. Or they may have learned it in class where it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Your child can list the point or label the point, and then from there fill in the formula for slope. So if I said that this was the second point, 5 minus 3 over 5 minus 2, the slope will be 2 over 3, which represents m. M in the slope-intercept form is y is equal to mx plus b. So therefore, you plug in the slope into this equation, y is equal to 2/3 x plus b. And at this point, your child may have a slight question as to what to do next, because they're not really sure what they're supposed to do because they have a y, they have an x, and they have a b. If they know it really well, then they will basically pick a point. They can pick either this point or this point, and you get the same answer either way, because either of these points represents the x and the y in this equation. So if I take this first point, so 3 is equal to 2/3 times 2 plus b. 3 is equal to 4/3 plus b. You subtract 4/3 from both sides, and therefore you are going to get that b is equal to 5/3. So now you can write the equation where y is equal to 2/3 x plus 5/3. For slope-intercept, it is generally appropriate to keep the y-intercept as an improper fraction. It really depends on the teacher. If your child ever has a question whether this is correct or not, they can actually connect the dots. And indeed, they could see that the y-intercept is somewhere around 1 2/3. I didn't draw my grid perfectly correct, so therefore it's not exact, but I think it's more important for the child to understand how it looks on the x and y plane. If they know how to write the equation in slope-intercept form, the next question that you could ask your child is to convert this into standard form. Standard form being ax plus by is equal to c. I always tell my students that basically slope-intercept form and standard form is the same equation, just slightly different. It's manipulated where the x term and the y term is on the same side of the equal sign, and the constant, or c, is on the other side. Sometimes kids get confused that maybe this b and this b is the same b, but it turns out that it isn't the same. If I wanted to convert this into standard form, what I would do is I would subtract 2/3 to both sides of the equation. So therefore, now I have negative 2/3 x plus y is equal to 5/3. The other requirement for writing an equation in standard form is that all the coefficients and the constants has to be a whole number. So therefore, the easiest way to do this is to multiply everything by 3. If you multiply 3 on one side, you have to multiply 3 on the other side. If you multiply one of the terms, you have to multiply all of the terms by the same number. So therefore, I get negative 2x plus 3y is equal to 5. Now, some teachers do not like it that there's a negative sign in front of the x term, so therefore you can take one more step where you multiply everything by negative 1, so therefore you get 2x minus 3y is equal to negative 5. Again, this equation and this equation is basically the same equation, just written in a different format. Once your child knows how to write the equation in standard form, you can ask another question, which is to write it in point slope form. And point slope form is basically m times x minus x1 is equal to y minus y1. And if you see this equation and you see the equation for slope, if they know the equation for slope, then basically they know the equation for point slope form, where basically they're multiplying both sides by this x2 minus x1. And the great thing about point slope form, it literally tells you what they're expecting, which is a point and slope. And now if you know your point that you choose, you can rewrite this where 2/3 x minus 2 is equal to y minus 3. So here's the point that I chose, 2, 3, and here's the slope. This is a question that you can ask your child over and over again. It is a question that comes up over and over again once they've learned this in the slope section of their math class. And it's also a question that reappears on standardized tests as well as college admission tests such as the SAT and ACT. I like to ask my students this question at least 2 or 3 or even 4 times a year, just to make sure that they understand how to write an equation from 2 points. And it's really, if they know how to do this, then they can move on to more difficult concepts related to linear equations. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.